gets better later, but it's always like
Starts off super quiet.
Yeah, I don't know. Gotta get like into it. Gotta get like
Maybe
Babylon.
Maybe just crack me up.
I did. You're cranked all the way.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
All right, it's fine. We'll figure it out. I think we're fine. What's up?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
I've been watching one movie for 3 days.
Yeah.
I did a 3-day marathon.
Feels like it. You know why?
Yo.
Because it's long as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
I watched it twice.
Yo.
Yeah, dedication.
Oh, man.
So everyone knows who puts in the effort in this.
So you watched it both times, no break, like boom,
Oh,
go?
no. The first time it took me 3 days, 1 hour every morning. And then the second time, I'm being a little unfair. The second time, half the time I was playing a video game while it was on.
Sure.
Because, and this is what we can talk about, there are lots of parts of this movie that are fucking amazing. And a lot of parts where you're just like, I'm going to check out for about 40 minutes now. And you don't need this much.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's because today, welcome to the low ceiling. I'm John.
And I'm Pri.
And we're talking about the film Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I want to address something. Saltburn.
Okay.
A film that we have talked about.
Uh-huh.
There was some talk that I heard fifth hand from the internet that people were like, isn't Saltburn the Babylon of this year?
Oh.
But I say no.
Oh.
It's not. Because Babylon, very split reception. There's lots of love.
Yeah.
There's a hive for Babylon, and there's a hive of people who are like, this, I hate it. I'm in the hive that I actually quite like this movie.
Okay.
The Saltburn of last year was Triangle of Sadness. Clearly.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
Oh, 100%. Thank you. Yeah. I was like, no, because Saltburn was way better received than both Triangle of Sadness and Babylon put together.
Of this trifecta of nonsense films.
Yeah.
Triangle of Sadness is definitely the one that was most well received, I think.
Well,
Saltburn and Babylon probably the worst received. Saltburn, they're both in the middle, but Triangle of Sadness was like quite well liked. Mm-hmm. But of their thematic value, I was like, no, Saltburn is the Triangle of Sadness of this year.
Was Triangle of Sadness also R-rated?
I don't know. There was lots of people like puking on naked women and
right, on the women, right,
beating an animal to death.
There's that. Okay,
but also, hey, capitalism's bad, right?
Yeah, the kids have to know.
You have never seen this movie until recently.
I didn't even have context into it.
I saw it on New Year's Eve 2022 with my mother, which was a really real experience. We both liked it. My mom's got good taste in movies.
Hell yeah.
I like this movie, but I want to hear what you think of this movie because you have no idea what it was about.
Okay. Like I prefaced it with like how long it took me to get through it. I absolutely hated parts of this movie.
Yeah.
And then I really liked some parts of this movie, but not enough to like tip it in the favor of overall I liked it. Nah, man. The first 5 minutes for me, I was like, that's all I needed in terms of the grandiose orgiosity of the 20s Hollywood scene. Great. And then that goes on for like 75 minutes in total again.
This has the longest time between the movie starting and showing the title.
It's like 32 minutes or something.
I think it is the longest in like an American film.
Yeah.
Beating out, unfortunately, my favorite film of all time, The Departed, which is, I believe, an 18-minute title drop.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I think Babylon did it just to spite The Departed.
I bet.
I think Damien Chazelle was just like, you know what? Fuck you, Scorsese.
Yeah.
I've won Best Director once. I don't think he did. I don't remember.
Was it La La Land?
Didn't he win Best Director for La La Land? I think he did.
Maybe.
Yeah, because then people were like, "Oh, it's gonna win Best Picture," and then Warren Beatty was like, "Real surprised." Yeah, yeah. So you
maybe that's why he made it.
Overall, this kind of tips into you not really enjoying this movie.
No, man, it was such a slog, and I just wanted everything before Tobey Maguire shows up to not exist.
Really?
Get that. I just like show me that shit in like 5 minutes. I understand he's trying to do it on purpose. We have to feel the trudge and like my God, how long it takes to shoot a scene, and like even a 10-second scene to shoot in the 20s took 40 takes because sound was so precarious, and all of that grief put together. I just couldn't.
You didn't like that?
No, it was all hollow, and it didn't really feel like I got any substance out of it.
You're gonna hate this podcast episode then, because I have a lot to say.
Okay, go on.
I have a big essay to talk about.
That's great.
Okay,
no,
so
do it.
I think parts of this movie are like amazing and really like joyful.
Yeah.
And I've seen this movie a couple times now, 3 times at least, and I find like the first 30 minutes, the party scene, to be like just fantastic. It's so crazy. I enjoy the fact that this movie is like completely maximalist while not being a typical blockbuster film. They're still like, let's put everything in this movie. And there's one thing that, in my opinion, and this is going to sound really dumb, the funniest joke I've seen in a film in like the last 3 years is when Brad Pitt is in the bathroom with that guy, and he's like, do you think people really want sound in their movies? And that dude rips a huge shit in the stall, and the guy, it just like goes on too long, and the guy's like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
It's like, but that
course.
joke, it's tonally not actually right for the movie.
No.
But it speaks to the fact that they were like, we will put everything in this film. We will put the most base slapsticky comedy and like some really thoughtful engagement with the art of cinema, which I thought was like really interesting.
Sure.
But there are lots of parts of this movie that I just check out from. Like I just don't think are really interesting. And funnily enough, I don't like the whole Tobey Maguire thing.
Because the Tobey Maguire thing is so tonally different from the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's what so much of it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Like everything leading up to anything the main leading guy, I say leading guy, but
Diego Calva.
Diego Calva, thank you, not
actor.
Danny.
Yeah.
Diego Calva, excellent. Like I wanted to see him
he's
more.
Great in this movie.
I wanted to see much less of Margot Robbie, which is, I never thought I would say that, because I mean, she's a stunner. You want to see it, but she's so 175% crazy in it.
I kind of like her in this movie, actually.
But it's just too much.
It's a lot, yeah. It's funny. You know who I think is like giving the most up and down performance in this movie is Brad Pitt.
Up and down?
Yeah, because
really?
I think there's lots of moments where, so for one, like it's hard to not compare this to Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's playing like what Leo DiCaprio was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in Babylon. But there's lots of times where you're just kind of like, he's having fun. Brad Pitt's having fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he's blowing up the screen or anything. But then there's moments where you're just like, this guy can really act. He's got a real future in the business if he's going to keep acting like. Because
he's the only person who brings any depth to this movie for me, where everybody else feels like
when he
shallow.
does bring it, he's really giving it.
Yeah.
And there are moments though that are often just kind of like wasted on him, I think. And I don't think he's like. There's a specific moment I'm thinking of where I'm like, Brad Pitt is elevating this scene so far above what it really needs to be.
Totally.
And there are moments like that, and then there's moments where you're like, how can Brad Pitt be this forgettable? He's Brad fucking Pitt.
Exactly.
I also kind of think that there are parts where Margot Robbie is amazing in this movie, and other parts where you're just like, don't need Margot Robbie to do this. Like, you don't need someone with the stature of Margot Robbie to play a part like this. I'll give you an example. Later in the film, when she is having a huge drug-fueled binge and needs to repay the money and stuff, which kind of drives the end of the plot.
Yeah.
Sorry, spoilers for a film that's 2 years old, but that stuff I just find her, I'm like, this isn't that interesting.
No, of course.
But there's this moment when when she's on the set for the first time and she's doing the scene, the director has her into the bar.
Yeah.
And she's like, what happened to the tits? She's like, just go to the bar, flirt with the guys, take a drink, hop on the bar, start dancing.
Yeah.
And Margot Robbie's like, okay. And she looks petrified, right?
Yes.
And there's this like kind of like push into her face as the director is like, okay, da-da-da-da, action. And you push into her face for like 2 seconds and she looks completely petrified.
Yeah.
And then she snaps into acting.
Acting.
And you're just like, that's like must be what Margot Robbie is like. And it's actually, but she's so fucking good at that moment.
Yeah.
And then that whole scene, I think, is like probably the best work she does in the movie.
Yeah,
where she's
absolutely.
like doing the crying and she's over the top. And excuse me, the second best, because the first best scene is when she says to the guy, "I think you wish you were eating my asshole."
her entry is also fucking
it's
great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But then her role devolves in the film, the less I care that it's Margot Robbie. And I think that's kind of a problem. Yeah.
I'm glad I was reading about, because I don't know anything, because I'm a young person. I don't know anything about the 20s, and I don't know anything about as if fucking Singing in the Rain. I don't even get out the door.
I've never seen it. Confession.
No idea. Right. And so for people, I feel like anybody in the audience that is in the bucket of like, oh, the nostalgia of seeing the stressful way to film a thing, and then how they've glorified it towards the end. It just didn't land for me. And then Margot Robbie's great at cry acting.
Yeah, screaming her head off too.
Just like, I did not even know that she was a big yeller. Like, she kills it. But man, as soon as that snake stuff started,
I hate that. I think that scene just
knocked me out. Yeah. I was like, nah.
You could like lift that whole sequence, and the film would be. It wouldn't miss anything.
All really. I could think about was, if I was trapped in a theater right now, having to sit through this 3+ hour film, I would never have a good thing to say about it.
Yeah, you know what's something that's really interesting I thought about this movie. It was like, I saw it in theaters, but it wasn't very packed. It was like kind of semi-full. This movie, for one, I think it's helped by being on streaming so that you don't have to sit in a theater through it. 2, if you did see it in theaters and you saw it with a crowd of people who did not like it, you would probably be like, I don't know if I liked that. But if you saw it with an enthusiastic crowd, you would feel a lot more positive about this movie. And I was happy. Like, the people in my theater seemed to enjoy it. But I could see people, like, lots of people hated this film.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I was really energized. I thought it was like a lot of fun. Even for and I was still like, that was really fucking long. But then again, it was like New Year's Eve. I was like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything.
It felt like a music video to me.
Lots of it.
What's the point of showing any of this in the greater scheme of things when, like, to me, like, this, he never lands the sticking, sticks the landing, lands the sticking.
He didn't stick.
Everything's stuck in for sure. But like, starting with the incredible opening where you have to literally pull an elephant up a mountain. Yeah. Going to a party where he's obviously trying to infiltrate this crowd. Great. After that, it's just about like people not really realizing their dreams, but you're not rooting for any of them because they're all fucking just like vapid. And Margot Robbie's character, couldn't care for her. Too crazy, too wild.
You don't care about Manny or Brad Pitt?
But Manny just suffered the whole time no matter what. Brad Pitt was incredible. He's always fucking great in everything. And I'm thinking, if they had not had a big name ticket like Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, I would never have fucking checked it out.
Yeah.
And I would have checked out of it way earlier if it was just like a bunch of like C-class actors.
In those moments where you need them to be great, they are great.
Yeah.
But there are also lots of moments where they're just not.
I just don't believe them to be like the characters they play. I'm just like, oh, Brad Pitt is drinking out of a glass of water. Brad Pitt is walking around the pool.
When I after having watched this a few times, I'm like, I think he's really perfect for this role.
He's so fucking good at like bringing depth to it.
Can I go back to what you said about not knowing enough about the era, kind of? There was a critic in Time, and I read her, I forget her name, I read her like review of this movie, and she did not like it. She knows a lot about the period, and what she talked about was the fact that she took issue with the inaccuracies of the film and the way that they relate to silent cinema. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But not to be like, hey, this great professional critic is an idiot. I'm not saying that. But something that I think about this movie is that it's less about explaining a time period as it is about trying to talk about a feeling. This movie is about, it comes together in the end with the montage. This movie is about the feeling of cinema as it shifts from like a certain art form into another. It becomes more commercialized and more sanitized. But the feelings always are the same. And that's what Manny is he's like after, right? And Manny's whole downfall is the fact that he comes into Hollywood because he wants to be part of the feeling, in my opinion, and he becomes just a tool.
Yeah.
And you see that in the way that he, at multiple points, forces the assimilation of people into the Hollywood machine. And he does it to other people of color. So I read this other this other review. It was on Slash Film, and it was by this guy named Robert Daniels. And it was all about, he was talking about how this movie is about how people get assimilated into the machine of Hollywood, essentially. And that's all like seen through Manny. And I found that once I read that, it like unlocked another kind of level of thought about this movie for me. And I thought was really interesting. Because I've always thought that Jovan Adepo, who plays Sidney Palmer.
Yeah.
Who's fantastic. He's in like The Watchmen. He's in Leftovers. Yeah. And he's really good in this role. When I first saw this movie, I was like, I don't know if his story is that necessary to this film. But the more I watch it, the more I'm like, his story is actually really interesting. It's just disserviced in this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
But the moment when Manny gets him to put on blackface is one of the most interesting parts of this film.
Absolutely.
By far.
I feel like you don't need a full character for 3 hours just to see a 5-second scene of a minority telling another minority, hey man, be more of a minority. You could have that independent of creating that character.
It's another film that's in this film. And it's like, that movie sounds interesting. Like the story of Sidney Palmer is like such an interesting thing. And it's unfortunately, it's the same for Lee Jun-Lee, who plays Lady Fei Zhu.
Right,
she kind of, like, Manny kicks her off the set because of this, like, possible lesbian romance he might have with Nellie Roy.
Yeah.
And then she kind of gets lost in the mix of the film, and her story kind of like fizzles out.
Totally.
Whereas like Sidney Palmer's, it sticks around long enough for you to remember, and then at the end when Manny does this thing to him, you're like, fuck, that is horrible. Like that's just like an awful moment.
Yeah.
I don't know, I find that stuff really interesting and fascinating about this movie.
Yeah.
But it just, like you said, it doesn't stick the landing on everything. But I think it's like worth kind of, like I think it's like worth thought for that. Yeah.
It was nice. It's nice to see him do that. It's nice to see that he had the thought enough to do that. And like have a cabaret dancer who's also maybe a lesbian, but also surrounded by like this male dominated industry where she has to put on a performance for the men too.
And also as Hollywood, what this movie is talking about is like as Hollywood becomes like more commercialized, more sanitized, more less libertine rather. People like Lady Fei Zhu, who are accepted and celebrated, as you see in the party scene, they start to get edged out, right? Yeah. And if they don't serve the machine, they get edged out of the picture, literally. And that's what happens to Sidney Palmer is like his story. If you track just his story, it's like, I love this scene because it kind of seems just like comedic at the beginning. But when he is like, so he's playing trumpet at this party and then he's talking to two of his other bandmates, right? And they're talking about the elephant coming in the door, and he's just like, we're just supposed to keep playing with this fucking elephants coming through the door. And then the one guy's like, I can't get injured. He's like, maybe if you got injured, you could stay home and fucking practice because you're playing a goddamn fucking E flat every time. And he's clearly a serious artist.
Yeah. I mean, he keeps like name dropping Rachmaninoff and like Scriabin. Like, I'm so.
But he's clearly like he is like what's his face from Whiplash.
Yeah,
he is that kid, right?
Yeah.
And he gets like more and more famous, and then he sees Sound Cinema come in, and he says, I think you're pointing the camera in the wrong direction. He gets his own show, and he's like, my talent has brought me here. But then he goes to the party, and he realizes he's kind of a freak show to them as a black man.
Of course.
And then when Manny asks him to put on blackface, it's like, oh, he's just a tool to appease Southern audiences.
Right.
And he does the noble thing and fucking quits.
Yeah.
I find that stuff so interesting. And I find like his performance in those moments and Manny's performance, like Manny puts on the straight face and gives him the stuff to put on his face.
Yeah.
And then when you turn back to Manny, he's like got his face in his hands, and you're just like, he hates doing this too.
Yeah.
And he's starting to realize that,
which is good.
He's abusing as a member of the system. And I found
which is
that
good because like
I'm
so happy that like Manny's character didn't like fucking day and night make a switch into a Southern asshole. Like it was refreshing to see that he still like struggled with the decisions that he had to make now that he's in a little bit more of a power position. But then of course he's still just a little boy who's in love with Margot Robbie and just flails around her.
I want to ask you, because I have a theory on this. Why do you think that is, though?
It's just he wants to be as close to stardom as possible. Because, like, if he can't manifest that into his life, he's like, okay, like, this is the first glimpse of the wildest thing I've ever seen. And he immediately, within 5 minutes of the movie, he tells her, "I'm in love with you." And she obviously doesn't clock
Te amo,
it.
Nelly.
Yeah.
Te amo, Nelly.
Te amo, Nelly.
Yeah.
And she fucking bolts. She's like, "Bye. I gotta get in the car
Go on set
and get a DUI."
Yeah.
And she just zips away. And of course, he's just holding on to this idea of this incredible starlet who's obviously going to become one, and then that he'll make a future together.
Okay, so you want to hear my theory? Nelly to Manny is a synechdoche for Hollywood. She is
like are we the people? Like
she is Hollywood to him.
Okay.
When he comes to Hollywood, it's this libertine, crazy bacchanalia, and Nelly is exactly that thing. And as Hollywood changes and Manny adapts and Nelly doesn't, he starts to come back down to earth when he has to do horrible things like make Sydney wear blackface, things like that. He starts to come down back to earth and realize that like he's just this cog in this machine. And as desperately as he wanted it, it's not actually the Hollywood that he wanted.
Yeah. He can't control her.
And that peaks when she basically like runs away from him and he witnesses a horrific murder.
Yeah.
And kills a guy.
Yeah.
So like hearing us talk about it, it doesn't really give the vibe of the fact that there's so much other stuff in this movie that's just fucking okay.
It's loaded.
Don't need this, don't need that.
Yeah.
But the parts that are interesting are like, I really like this. And it's
Totally.
really thoughtful.
There is a fucking tighter movie in there
100%.
that just will never come out because they suffer from the fucking Eternals effect of it, where it's like, here's 17 people that you should focus on, of which like 15 are fucking boring.
Yeah.
And one of them is so crazy over the top, you can't keep your attention on her all the time. And then there's Brad Pitt. So now I'm just watching a Brad Pitt movie, but he's kind of not in there.
But like as the movie kind of goes forward, he starts to become more prominent. And it's like the film, it's disjointed to say the least. But like, I think that Nelly is so much the first half of this movie.
Yeah.
And then Brad Pitt is so much the second half of this movie. And then you come back to Nelly. And Manny is kind of the spine that holds them all together in lots of ways. He's like really good for that. Like I really like Diego Calva in this film. But like
if Entourage made a movie, which they did, but like of this scale, where it was like a 3-hour, and of course the contents of the movie are the same. It starts off with this like incredible orgy scene that goes on forever. Bring a crazy elephant into the party. There's cocaine everywhere. Why is that less highbrow than Babylon?
I think Damien Chazelle is a really good director. And he elevates this stuff. And like clearly this was like a bit of like a blank check where they were kind of like,
Go nuts.
$90 million, like do what you want. And he's like, I will.
Yeah.
I think there is a level of artistry to this film that is above lots of stuff. You just have to admit it. Like just the way he shoots things and the music is like unfucking real good.
Oh my God. Of course. Like I bet he tucks a trumpet into bed every night. Like Damien Chazelle's favorite little trumpet.
Yeah.
Oh, gorgeous.
He's like, one day when I kick myself out of Hollywood, I'll come back to playing you, little boy.
Yeah.
And because like it's so funny because like this movie definitely seems like he's like, this is what you want. I'll just give it to you.
I'll give it to you.
Because it's so funny. I always forget that I'm like yeah, like I love Whiplash. I really like La La Land, and then I always forget I'm like, oh yeah, he made First Man.
Yeah.
And that's actually my favorite movie of his. I think First Man is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And like lots of people are like, I don't know, it seemed kind of boring. I was like, it's not. It's great.
Spaceman.
And then First Man doesn't, I guess, do what it's kind of meant to do. And so Chazelle is kind of like, let's go back to the La La Land, but make it insane.
Oh, yeah.
And I appreciate that. Like I kind of like that he knows where his bread is buttered in that way.
There's the Chef Kiss review that I read where it was, in the name of the Father, Boogie Nights, the Son, Wolf of Wall Street, and the Holy Spirit, Babylon.
Yeah, I think there's lots of that influence, and like it's so funny because like as a not as educated a film person, lots of reviews by like smarter people are like, clearly he took a lot of influence from Singing in the Rain. And I'm like, I don't know, Singing in the Rain seems pretty tame.
Yeah. Yes.
Like the scene, the soundstage scene when they first bring sound in, that was like, I was like, this is like essentially Wolf of Wall Street, because it even has one of the guys. It has Rugrat because of his stupid fucking hairpiece.
Rugrat.
It's got a Rugrat in it, and he's
love
like,
that guy. He's doing so chaotic.
He's doing the exact same thing he was doing
the
in fucking Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Shoop.
And and Margot Robbie is doing what she was doing Wolf of Wall Street too. I like this movie a lot, and I think that it's a good example of like further scrutiny. I'm just kind of like the more I think about it, the more I appreciate what it was doing.
Is it because there's no limits to the debauchery, like where there's no restraint? Meanwhile, in other movies, you can tell that they pull back a little bit, but here it's like, you want a 12-minute orgy? I'll give you a 72-minute orgy. Like they just keep going, and it's punishing. But
I certainly
maybe that's
admire it.
Bold.
Like, yeah, I admire that. But I admire the maximalism of it. Like, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And to make to string together very faintly a story throughout the whole thing, even though yes, lots of parts could be cut or weren't to my taste.
Yeah.
It's like pretty admirable.
Yeah.
And then, but there are those like moments of feeling where I'm like, I get like really emotional because I'm like, I think this moment is done perfectly. The blackface scene, Jack when he commits suicide, I think is one of the best scenes in the film.
Really?
Yeah, I think that we'll get to it, but I want to talk about why.
Okay.
But like, I think that scene is unbelievable.
Okay.
I think it's so good, and it's kind of what you're leading up to.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think the fucking ending with the montage is amazing. I think it's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've never seen anything like that.
I think the length of the movie is a problem, but that ending, to me, it like pulls focus on the film a lot more in a way that when I left the theater, I was like, fuck, that's so fucking interesting and cool. And I know it's corny and cheesy and stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was like, that's just such a cool way to end a film to also make you be like, yeah, I like movies too, actually. Yeah.
I feel like the fact that the movie is so long is a bigger problem than other movies that are long. For instance, Kingdom of Heaven.
Beau's Afraid.
Beau's Afraid. Oh my God, I'm just PTSD immediately, right? Like the rage I felt sitting through Beau's Afraid because it was at the cinemas is the same rage I felt sitting through this, that the ending had a way smaller payoff for me.
Beau's Afraid is Ari Aster's Babylon, though.
There
like,
you are.
They are
totally.
Like, that is Ari Aster being like, you give me that money, I'm making this movie. And I think I said it in the episode, as much as I don't like Beau's Afraid for lots of reasons, I really admire the fact that he was like, I'm fucking throwing it all in there, man. Like, I like that. Yeah, I think it's cool.
Well, like, it's awesome because like some directors just make movies for themselves, no matter what the fucking audience takes from it. And this for Chazelle is a movie for him. I don't think it's for Hollywood. I don't think he's paying an homage. Yeah. He's kind of saying, fuck you. Like, this is all a joke.
It also feels like some of the criticism of La La Land, well, it was a well-received movie. Like, lots of people kind of roll their eyes about La La Land because it's a little cloying about Hollywood, and it's a little bit like, showbiz and jazz and stuff. And I think Chazelle knows that. He's a buddy of mine. He's actually behind me right now. But
James,
he keeps talking up, and I have to punch him. But no, like I feel like this is a bit of a response to that, where it's just kind of like, okay, well, I also feel this way about Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it turns out that this movie, I think, is like, although I like La La Land for a musical, because I generally don't like musicals, this movie is a little like actually more interesting and thoughtful, I think, than La La Land.
Is it? I wonder if like because he went so hard on like the sexual stuff, and like the first 2.5 hours of the film is just like bam, 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 bam,
screaming,
all the drugs,
other,
like everything that is extreme and not sanitized, like you said. That towards the end, was it just a cop out where he was like, yes, but we all love cinema for the nature of cinema, like it's emotive just because the lead, which is Danny, who's like suffered through this fucking trial for his entire career, is now just he like flips the switch and is like, that's true, I've just always loved movies. And
why would you say it's a cop out though? Like, what do you mean?
Because
say more about that.
But I feel like even Brad Pitt's death, to me, when he like he realizes that's it for him, like this is where he peaked. And with sound,
he peaked long ago. Actually.
He peaked long ago. Yeah. And ever since then, he's just been the guy they get to like get a movie out of the ditch, or a piece of shit film where they're like, Brad, can you come save us? And he's like, all right, I'll see what I can do. It's not about him anymore. It's just his brand. It's a shallow thing.
Yeah.
So obviously he does the extreme thing, and he completely removes himself from the industry and life itself because he's so tied to it.
Yeah. He's tied to the past.
But like even his death, because I saw it coming from such a long while ago, he's obviously depressed the whole time. And his friend Manny, who's supposed to be like there's no relationship there. There's no one bound to him.
It phases out of the film a lot. Yeah.
And
but
then
Manny, like the studios, because Manny is moving up in the world, he leaves Brad Pitt behind.
Yeah.
There's a part where they're at the William Randolph Hearst party.
Right.
And Brad Pitt is pissed off because everyone is like acting like his film is a fucking funeral.
Totally.
And he bumps into Manny and he gives him this look where you're just like, he's like, I don't have time for anyone like you. Because everyone else, you're being like everyone else. It's like this moment that's communicated so well,
quickly,
it's like,
beautiful.
How could Manny become like all these other fucking assholes? And at the same time too, it's like Brad Pitt is like, I'm the person who fucking brought you on the set when Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers said no. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I don't. But like, what do you mean by like copping out? I'm still curious.
Because there's no other emotive part for me. There's no like romanticizing of cinema through the movie for me.
Are you saying you don't romanticize cinema? You just host a podcast about
no,
movies?
like in this movie didn't romanticize movie making. It made it seem like everything's a struggle and everything sucks and it's hard and we just fucking forget.
Yeah.
Then towards the end, it's like, yes, but the romance of cinema, guys, singing in the rain. Where did it come from? Like it just felt like
I like that.
I got bulldozed by it just to like rush to an ending, and I guess I didn't buy into Manny feeling.
One thing I think about the movie, which I think is like what the ending speaks to me about, is the fact that all of these characters, we interrupt their story at the peak, basically. They're in the peak of Hollywood, of their Hollywood. And what I think someone like Jack is lamenting in this movie, because he says it right before he commits suicide. He's like, it was a hell of a town, right? And it's a very sad scene, I think. And he's remembering, he's like very nostalgic about a time that doesn't exist anymore. A lot of this movie is about the way that the art moves from, this is what speaks to me about this movie. Art is started and progresses by these outcasts and these people who anywhere else would be like losers or whatever, or just wackos, but they want this bigger thing and they create this artwork. For a lack of a better term, it's kind of like punk rock. Yeah. And they create this artwork on their own terms and their rules, and then capitalism comes in and starts to put these rules upon them and enforce these standards and sanitization, things like that. It's like, you can't put this on cinema and blah, blah, blah. Start to enforce these rules, and the outcasts start to have to work within a system that they had never wanted to, but then the capitalists with the money come in and make it uncool. Yeah. And they're lamenting a time when it was like, and I think everyone has that nostalgic feeling when it's kind of like, we fucking talk about it on the show. We're like, sometimes we're like, they don't make them like they used to, you know? I say that ironically a lot, but sometimes you watch movies and you're just like, there's nothing like this. You watch some movies by like Stanley Kubrick and you're just like, nobody makes movies like this anymore. It is no one. It just doesn't happen, basically. Yeah. That speaks to me about this movie. And I think that the intensity of Jack's reaction is like metaphorical to the fact that it's like, you can be so nostalgic for this type of feeling, and the feeling of it getting ripped away can be so devastating.
Fatal, yeah.
And I think that Manny, the way at the end he's overwhelmed with emotion, not just to see Singing in the Rain, but to see a fictionalized version of things that he was part of, that he helped build, then they're lionized in an artwork that will last forever. I think that's really interesting.
Oh, fuck yeah. I didn't think about it like that.
To go back to what I was saying about the movie's not about telling you about something, it's about accessing a feeling about something. Right. Eleanor St. John, the critic, she has a very frank conversation with Jack, and she says, she's like, your time's over. But the good thing is, when someone throws on your film, you'll live forever. Yeah. Now, this time critic who I mentioned before, something she brought up, which I found really interesting, was that in the era of silent cinema, they mostly thought of film as like disposable. It's just kind of like, it's like they make this shit, they print a thing, they send it off to a couple theaters. Yeah. If it gets lost, who cares? It's right? we're always printing more. Right. Like, for example, there was a documentary. I never saw the documentary, but I found the story really interesting. There's a documentary a couple of years ago. I think it was called something Frozen Time. Dawson City's Frozen Time, something like that.
Okay.
And what it was about was that in the Yukon, I think it's the Yukon or it's Alaska, I'm not sure. They excavated this hockey rink, and underneath it, they found these crates full of all of these silent film reels that people had thought were lost.
Oh, shit.
And that's often was the fate of the quote unquote, the art, right? Was that it would be so disposable that people would just be like, I don't know, we sent them to the end of the line, which is Dawson City, fucking like the Yukon territory.
Yeah.
And they're not coming back. So,
Oh.
And it's like, there was like old newsreels. I think there was something to do with like the World Series, like film of the World Series from like 1919 or something.
Oh my God.
It's a really fascinating thing because for most of that early part of cinema, that's what film was. It was just this, it was like a newspaper. You also threw that away. And the theater going experience, which we don't really get now, is like, it was totally different. It was like going to a show. You just step in, you'd step out, you'd pop it, whatever. Alfred Hitchcock with Psycho, he was one of the first people to say, you cannot come to this movie in the middle of it. You have to come at the beginning. And that was a huge like revolution. Not that that wasn't happening, but the movie going public was just different than we are
casual.
Now. And so this Time critic was like, it's weird for Eleanor St. John to say to Brad Pitt that you'll be remembered because you might as well, like you might just be totally lost. But that's why I think the movie is more about the feeling. That's what he's trying to say is that you will still live on through these movies.
Yeah. Oh, well, when you put it like that, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
It's more that I see why like it has a more of an emotional pull for that audience that really liked it.
Yeah.
That like it's not just about relating to any characters or Hollywood in general, but I
think you can relate to characters, right? Like I think Manny's reaction at the end is a relatable thing because people see movies and they have reactions. The movement in this film of like these sloppily made silent movies to very organized and difficult artwork, while it may be, flush with capitalist money and rules and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's still, you can still make art within that system, and some people get left behind and some people don't.
Yeah.
A big production like that can still evoke emotion, which I think is the interesting like double side of the coin at the end of this movie is like you're watching a man be overwhelmed with nostalgia while a montage of The Matrix and Avatar and all of this stuff plays on film for you.
Yeah. And
you can remember those times where you're like, wow, like that something like awed me too, right? Yeah,
when they kind of bring back the first opening scene again towards the end, the big orgy, and then played into the montage of the
yes.
That like pulled me out again. I feel like I was like, we just saw that, and then we've been seeing it for the continuation of the movie, and then we see it in the same breath as we see Terminator.
Yeah.
Or like E.T. or whatever else just kind of lines up. I get it. I get the nostalgia of like portraying cinema as more than just like a sum of efforts, right? It's like you said, the feeling that you have.
It's magical. There's something magic about it.
Right.
That's part of that's like when Brad Pitt at the Kinoscope lot gets hammered and they have to push him up a hill to get one shot on a camera that they didn't think they would get. And then they end up getting this incredible magic hour shot. That's like and like Spike Jonze is like crying and stuff. Like that's like that's the feeling that you're supposed to get. And I think that's like you in the ending montage, you see a shot of Manny during that moment.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where he's like he realizes he's like, this is it. This is everything. Yeah.
I wish I had it. Like I wish I felt that and I wasn't consumed by like distracting rage of like how long and tiring it was.
I don't mean this flippantly. Maybe like in a couple months just rewatch the movie.
I think
like,
so too.
You know what I mean?
I feel like and it was also like watching it at the cinemas is 100% a different experience than watching it at home over the course of 3 days for the first time.
Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like I miss a lot of that total immersiveness, of being like, as soon as I started watching it, I was like, oh, I want a bucket of popcorn. Like, what am I? Why am I watching this just like alone?
This movie is like, the thing is like, compared to like Beau is Afraid, is like, Beau is Afraid, I just found parts of it very boring. This movie kind of is never boring. There are parts where you're just kind of like settled back in your seat in the theater and you're like, move along.
Oh, totally.
But like and I think we said this in the Napoleon episode too, is like there's really no part of it that's like
duller.
Yeah. Like even in the theater, I was like, that whole snake fight scene, after it ended, I was kind of like, I mean, whatever. But and then it moves on to something and you're like, okay,
it's crazy after crazy, right? It's like go, 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 no matter what.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
it's throwing everything at the wall and then taking everything that you threw at the wall and still putting it in the film. Yeah.
Jesus. Ugh. It's a fucking triumph, dude. It's an epic, like, of course, it's a huge thing to put together and very bold, like you said, to even do it. Because I've never, like, I don't know, I think of Caligula or something. But then that's like one aspect of it.
What do you mean Caligula?
Just like
the Alex McDowell or the McDowell movie? Malcolm McDowell?
Yes.
The one that's like was produced by Penthouse?
Some part of it. That's my feeling. No, I wish it had something greater to tell me through the characters than it did through me having to like fish for a feeling.
Do the work.
Just like, even if it's moments, because it's so go, 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 like a cocaine fueled fucking rage.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, that's just their state of being. And we're just tied to the back of their car, dragged through the street.
Yeah.
That's where it was like a miss for me. Because the entirety of the movie is like that until the end, where the guy's just like, oh my God, but didn't you enjoy the dust in your face though? Didn't it remind you of Mexico? I don't know.
Yeah, I can see how you feel that way. I don't know. I think I'm more forgiving of the stuff that you're just kind of like, I think it builds to
and also you saw it twice, right?
Yeah.
And like you have a better experience of seeing it. And maybe that's what I need. Maybe I do need to not fucking consume it through streaming.
No, like I said, like I liked this movie when I first saw it. I like it more now.
Yeah.
But it is because like we decided to do this episode on it, and I was like, let me like look into this more. And I will say, I'll say it again, that Robert Daniels' essay in Slash Film is really worth reading.
Nice.
And it changed, like, I aped a bunch of his ideas to talk about it today, but it really inspired me to be like, to like, what is going on in those moments where I think there's something significant to say, what is happening in them. The scene where she fights a rattlesnake is just like, nothing is really happening.
Nothing happens.
The scene where Manny drives Brad Pitt home and he jumps in the pool is just kind of like, who cares? But the scenes that are full are like really full. It's like you have a bunch of fucking cups and like some of them are empty and a bunch are like overflowing with shit. And I find that
how you make
stuff,
music, baby.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. Do we want to talk about the plot? There's a lot. I want to talk about like some specific
Let's get into some
scenes.
because I know there's some scenes that really were touching and like really worth talking about.
The weird thing is like this movie kind of has like five major scenes and then a bunch of little shit in between. So that's what's weird. It's what's very weird about it. So we've talked about a lot of it. So it starts off with this huge fucking crazy ass party. Manny is a Mexican guy who wants to work in Hollywood. He meets Margot Robbie. She says, like, I think you wish you were eating my asshole, which I think is fucking hilarious. When she like runs over the statue, she's like, oh, you got statues popping up out of nowhere.
How is in my way?
Also, the great Olivia Wilde cameo in this.
Oh, excellent. And then just disappears, never comes back again. It's great.
Nope, just a little cameo.
5 seconds.
She had to go to the Don't Worry Darling set, which is probably just down the road. You meet the 4 principal characters, which are Margot Robbie, Nellie Leroy, Diego Calva, Manny, Lee Jun Lee, who plays Lady Fei Zhu, Joe Venedepo. Oh, 5 then. Joe Venedepo plays Sidney Palmer, the trumpeter.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt plays Jack Conrad, the Brad Pitt of his era.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Manny helps the producer's assistant, this guy Don Wallach. He helps him. This guy played by Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then he's like, can I work on set? And Flea is like, no. And then Brad Pitt is like, drive me home. Get home. Brad Pitt is like, come out to the set. You can do anything I ask, basically. And
welcome to my mansion. You can live here if you like.
Yeah.
And
then there's like the huge kinoscope lot, which is like a billion short films all shooting at once, which is like just insane. And Spike Jonze being a crazy German director is really funny. And then I think the actress I think her name's Olivia Hamilton, who plays the other director. Okay. She's fantastic. I think she's a producer.
She's so great.
I think she's a producer on the movie as well.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay.
I listened to a podcast interview with her Chazelle and another producer, and I think she's also a producer. But she is so good in this movie.
She's
dude.
like not lost in time. She could be exact character right now in another movie, playing the exact same role.
So fucking
perfect.
She like discovers Nellie Leroy, who gets given a part by chance, essentially, and Nellie becomes like the next big silent film star, and she's also just like a drug addict and a gambling addict and all that fun stuff.
A wild child, like she calls herself.
The least voted the least dressed woman in Paris. This is pretty funny.
That was fucking great.
Titles, by the way. Yeah. Lady Fei Zhu, who is Asian, Chinese, does not get to appear on camera. She only gets to write the titles.
Oh.
Yeah. When you first meet her, she talks to Jack Conrad, and she's like, I didn't get the part, but I get to write the titles for the movie Maids Off. Yeah, which is like, I think she's very good in this role.
Yeah, totally.
The performance she does at the party is really great, and also just like that actress she's so good and so subtle and lovely in this. Her story doesn't take off, unfortunately.
No, maybe it's on purpose because like her character also doesn't take off, and she's just a footnote.
She kind of gets checked out of the film by Manny, and then checks back in at the end to talk to Jack. But there's no real story happening with her in between. I mean, it would shock me if there was like a bunch of deleted scenes for this movie. But maybe there's a 6-hour cut maybe somewhere. There's a fucking director's cut coming out. Yeah. I would watch that shit. Hell yeah.
Of course you would.
So Manny, he is like working closely with Jack, and then he gets like moves up the studio ladder. He goes out to New York to watch The Jazz Singer, the first talking picture, and he does the whole like, oh, life's gonna fucking change now. The irony is that Jack Conrad, he gives a drunken speech at the beginning, being like, we have to change the form, we have to innovate, and blah blah. Then he falls off the roof into his pool. Normal stuff. And they move into the sound cinema era, and there's a very long scene where they are trying to shoot with sound, which I happen to think is fucking hilarious. I think Lloyd, the sound guy, he's played by Carson Higgins, is one of the most underrated roles in this movie.
Is it the taller guy who's like up in the booth? He's fantastic.
Amazing.
Oh my God. I want to see him rage like often.
The part where he storms down. He's like, do people hear that ringing? Do you hear that ringing?
Is that ticking?
He's like, oh, I just found it. It's a metal pin in her leg.
Oh my God.
It's so fucking
it's
funny,
excellent. Oh, he's like, great.
The way they just like scream at each other is just, it's so fucking funny,
just
man.
The fact that the frustration of that the people felt filming that is what I guess he wanted the audience to feel, because I was raging at how long this fucking scene was.
That scene is very long.
It's like some 12 takes, but you're there for every fucking second of every fucking take.
It's so fucking funny.
Within 3 takes, I was like, I want to kill. Just oof.
You know what's the thing? The thing is like, that's a scene that if you're like, I'm never gonna watch Babylon again, but I liked that scene. It's like, watch that shit on YouTube. It's hilarious. It's like well worth it, but it is fucking long as hell. Again, it's the maximalist intent of the
with
film,
anything.
Right?
It's not just this scene. Yeah. Everything that is of some sort of significance is dragged out.
Yeah, you could do that scene in like a minute and a half.
Yeah,
but he chooses to drag it out, and I think part of that for me is like Chazelle. I think there's parts of the movie where he's like, he has this like vision for it, and he's like, I want this exact thing. And I think that's one of them.
I think
the party scene is another that was like very clearly envisioned in his mind.
Totally.
And very incredibly shot, because it's like that party scene I find is like, it's so amazingly chaotic, but also so controlled in a way. And like, I have to say, like, in lots of other movies, I wouldn't like the part where Nellie just starts dancing. I think is amazing. I think it's like, it's so captivating.
Yeah. And everybody is, because you get your time with every single person in that frame.
Yeah, and the music in this movie really elevates it, because it's so fucking... I listen to the album a lot, actually, because I think it's just like really joyful. Even just like when they have those extended kind of like... I'm like, yeah, you cut this stuff out. But in this movie, I'm like, I fucking love this. I think it's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And like just the crazy shit that she does, and just I think it's fantastic.
Hell yeah.
So anyway, sound comes in. We have the big sound scene, and then Jack Conrad is like kind of coaxed into this scene, and like that's Singing in the Rain kind of thing, and that's where Sidney Palmer is like, I think you got the camera's facing the wrong way, and Manny is like, good idea, and then he gets Sidney Palmer his own show performing music with African-American band. And then Manny also, he has to like, as he moves up, he has to clean up Nellie's image, because she's, as we said, drug addicted. A wild child. Least dressed woman in Paris.
Yeah.
Maybe having a lesbian romance with Lady Fei Zhu, who he then kind of casts away because nobody writes titles. There goes her job. Nobody writes titles for films anymore. And nobody casts Asian women, unfortunately, too. Yeah. So the stuff where you see this guy having to whitewash and sanitize Hollywood is, my God. It's really like interesting and
100%
heartbreaking, you know?
Yeah.
Because as we see earlier with Lady Fei Zhu, she is like adored. Right, by everybody. Yeah. Because when she performs this song and stuff, this song that's about being gay.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then all of a sudden, none of that's okay.
No.
And it's really upsetting, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The song she sings about, you know, gently taking a female lover, that song is later in the movie sung by a guy. You just hear it in the background where it's like a male voice singing the same song. Oh, go on.
Hello, Mom. Mother
she
just
knew
called.
We were
my mom just FaceTimed me.
She's
like, "You talking about Babylon?" I really like that movie.
She gets it.
She did like
What's
it.
Up, Moms?
Nice, yeah. And later it is interesting. You hear the song. It's called "My Girl's Pussy."
Yeah. And
it's sung in the asshole of Los Angeles, Tobey Maguire's Big Party, which is a real scene.
The tension, I was so stressed. And then when they so it's like going through Dante's 9 circles of hell or whatever. They enter this tunnel, keep going down in a basement where every floor is some sort of debauchery where, like, you know, you're messing with short people or deformed people and women in a cage fighting each other to death. And then the absolute bottom is just a guy who eats a rat.
You know what's interesting about that? And this is not my original idea, but I read about this and I don't remember which piece I read it in. But what I found really interesting about someone's take on that was they were like, as Hollywood has moved forward in this era, what's the difference between a freak and a star? And that's what I found. I don't like that scene overall, but when I kind of read that, I was like, that's an interesting thing.
Because he's the wild child here.
And Tobey Maguire is like, this guy's going to be a huge star, like in Hollywood. And it's like, he's a dude, he's like a huge muscle man eating a rat. But it kind of speaks to the theme of usury that's happening within the system, right?
Yeah.
And I found that I was like, that's an interesting thought.
He's in like real life 4chan. Like he's living it. He's watching all of this stuff unfold. There's a random fucking crocodile just like loose.
Chilling. Yeah.
Well, it's just everything
we're going to get to that scene.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
So essentially they're like, Manny has to clean up Nellie's image and then he does, and she goes to this William Randolph Hearst party. A very long scene I don't love, but she essentially rejects the sanitization of her character and tells the joke about the bear and the rabbit wiping his ass, which is, and then the thing is that scene just like she goes even further. Like she tells the joke and everyone's horrified. Then she stuffs her face full of food. Then she throws up on the floor. Then she throws up on the guy. Yeah.
Oof.
And in this scene too, we find out that Jack's new talkie is a real stinker.
Yeah.
And nobody can really take him seriously as a film star who speaks. He was a huge silent star.
Yeah.
And Jack's starting to realize his time is over. Tries to get a hold of like Irving Thalberg, played by Max Minghella, based a real person, Irving Thalberg. One of the few who's like actually a real person in this movie. Max Minghella is son of Anthony Minghella, great filmmaker, talented Mr. Ripley.
Oh shit!
He's in The Social Network. Yeah, he's good. He's also good in this movie. You barely see him. Like you barely see like you never get a shot of actually Max Minghella, but you're like, hey, that's the guy in The Social Network, and he's great. I love that actor. What I like about Jack's kind of character at this point is that he's like, his rejection of assimilating to the new Hollywood is that he's like, listen, I'll do what you want, but don't fucking stop telling me that it's something that it's not.
Yeah.
Just tell me that it's shitty and tell me you need me to save your fucking movie.
Yeah.
And I will come and do it happily.
Totally.
But don't lie to me, basically. And I love that scene when he's like on the phone. And then when he's shooting, I really love how like he's doing this movie and it sucks. And the director gives this other actor these like long notes. He's like, do that, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you good, Jack? That's it. It's like,
that's it.
Jack does not matter. And I have to say, Brad Pitt's shirt in that scene, I need it in my life.
It's fucking
amazing.
Good. Everything he's in. But like especially
it's Brad fucking Pitt.
It's Brad fucking Pitt. You're so fucking right, because every time Brad Pitt comes on, I'm just like, how much of this did he feel about his own life where he's never not going to be relevant.
But isn't it weird to think that Brad Pitt might feel that way?
Yeah,
because this is the movie he did just after winning an Academy Award.
Yeah.
For the first time, I might add. Like, Brad Pitt is an amazing actor, but it's fascinating, and I think what gives credence to his performance is like, maybe Brad Pitt does sometimes feel that way.
Maybe.
You know?
Or at least he's convincingly fucking got us.
I certainly think that in Once Upon a Time in America, Leo was accessing a lot of those feelings.
I bet.
You know?
I bet.
I want to get to the scene that really demonstrates that. But after this, Manny asks Sydney to do blackface. Sydney does, but he obviously doesn't like it. No. And he quits the show. He packs up his bags, and he goes to perform in essentially exclusively black venues, which is
right.
You see it very close to the end, which is a really nice little clip.
Yeah.
This is the scene I want to get to. Jack's at this party with his new wife. It's very quiet. I think it's like the wrap party for the shitty movie he's in.
This is like his third wife or something, and
yeah. By the way, one of his wives, Catherine Waterston,
another
a friend
Catherine
of the pod.
Waterston joint. Because she's so great when she's trying to give him, she's a Broadway star. She's trying to give him notes on how to talk and enunciate in his films because they're moving into sound.
Yeah. That scene,
so good.
Something interesting about that part is that Jack Conrad is constantly having to compete with Catherine Waterston's character, who is seen as this great artist. And yet Jack is like more famous, but seen as a trash kind of.
Yeah.
And when his friend George kills himself and he's the first person who ever told me I was good.
Yeah.
The way that he's talking about how he's like, this is artwork and this can be like real, you know?
Yeah.
And I found that like so striking because he's standing up for this thing that he's like, but you can't be part of it. Like Jack Conrad can't be part of it. And I find that scene like really, really good. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And then, okay, so he's at this party with his third wife and he runs into Lady Feijoo and they sit down and talk and she's like, hey, I'm going to Paris. They got good taste over there. Pathé wants me. Big French cinema studio or whatever. I think when they say she's like, I'm going to Paris and he says they have good taste over there. It's like, it's like kind of a hint at it's like a Chinese person can be shown on screen over there, you know?
Right.
Which is also heartbreaking.
Right.
There's this part though where he's like, Lady Feijoo is like, how are you and stuff, and Brad Pitt, he puts his like hand to his face and his hand is like shaking.
He's the best.
He's
man.
just like killing this tiny little moment.
So goddamn good.
And then he says the thing, he's like, it was a real hell of a town, you know? And you're just like, oh man, this is horror. And like, I knew at that point. I was like,
you know what's going to come. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's so beautiful in this like moment. And the chemistry between him and Lee Jun Lee, amazing. She's so perfect in the scene.
It's unmatched.
Yeah.
I wanted that to last forever.
Well, like it's like there's a movie in here about Sidney Palmer.
100%.
Jovan Adepo is a fucking awesome actor.
Jesus.
There's a movie in here about him. There's a movie in here about Brad Pitt and Lady Feijoo, like being buddies in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I would watch the shit out of any of those.
They're just left as side characters.
It's unfortunate that it's stuffed into this one film in a way, but also you do get like kind of juicy little bits. And then Jack goes upstairs and kills himself. And there's a moment too where he talks to the bellman. He's like, it's so heartbreaking because you know he's gonna go kill himself. Yeah. Like when I saw this the first time, I'm like, he's gonna commit suicide or something. Yeah. And he's like, what's the best tip you've ever got? And he's like, $50. He's like, from who? It's from you. And it's like,
Mr. Conrad.
I was like, dude, don't kill yourself.
And then he hands him his entire wallet basically, and it's like fucking $1,000.
I find that scene really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then essentially Nellie owes a bunch of money to these people from her gambling, and she needs Manny to figure it out. Manny and another underrated star, Rory Scovel, as the count.
Where? Unexpected.
Amazing.
Incredible.
He's so good in this.
Just like my heart, I think that's why I perked up later, because like you're just so in the dumps with Brad Pitt, the fucking best part of the movie, probably not going to be there anymore for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And there was still an hour and a half left to go.
That's a lot, yeah.
And I was like, no, not Brad Pitt. And then immediately Rory Scovel shows up and is like, all right, redeemed.
He's
redeemed.
He's been around because he's like the on-set drug dealer and he wears a Dracula costume.
You want some peanuts? Get some peanuts or whatever.
He's so good in this. And then he has to go pay off this debt to Tobey Maguire, who's an extreme creep. Tobey Maguire, also a producer of the movie, gets to be a little cameo. He's great.
I heard that they were gonna go with Caprio, and then at the time Caprio was busy with something. He's like,
DiCaprio.
why don't you talk to my friend Toby?
Yeah.
And then that's how he came to be, and I thought that was
God,
cool.
if Leo was in this, that would be amazing. That would be like in Django Unchained.
Oh, 100%. If there was a double choice between going with Emma Stone instead of Margot Robbie, and then Emma Stone was supposed to be based on a real-ish character who was closer to like the, maybe not Wild Child, but
Clara Bow.
Probably someone also eccentric. Yeah. Then they would not have sexualized it because you can't talk poorly about.
I think Robbie is perfect for what she brings.
Course,
I don't think Emma Stone I think it would be a very different movie with Emma Stone.
It would be a very different movie.
Even though we saw Poor Things and Emma Stone was going ape shit in that, but in a different way.
Yeah.
She's amazing, but like Robbie brings a certain type of energy, definitely.
Oh, 100%.
But so, yeah, Tobey Maguire brings them to the asshole of Los Angeles, which is this insane underground rave party full of quote-unquote freaks,
yeah.
You know? Manny realizes that the Count has brought him fake prop money, and so does Tobey Maguire, and then there's a big kind of chase scene.
The way he like explains to him, what do you mean, $85,000?
Where do you think I would get $85,000 in 2 days? Yeah,
so casual. Yeah. Love it. Love my guy Rory Scovel.
I gotta say too, there's a moment here we'll get to. So Manny goes to grab Nellie. He's like, Nellie, Rory Scovel, we're leaving the country, we're going to Mexico. He goes with Nellie to like get gas. He tries to convince her. He's like, come. And she's like, yeah, I'll come to Mexico finally. Nice scene where they're in the middle of that Mexican wedding is actually very sweet.
Yeah.
The theme, it's called the Manny and Nellie theme from the soundtrack. Very beautiful.
Nice.
I really like it. She's like, yeah, I'll come to Mexico with you. She finally relents. They go back to Rory Scovel's place. Nellie gets out of the car, says, ain't life grand, and then skips off into the darkness, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
I love people disappearing into the darkness.
Yeah.
Into the unknown in movies. I think it's great.
I'm a sucker for it.
Even though you do find out what happens to her ultimately.
Yeah.
And then Manny goes up to Rory Scovel's. There's this moment where Scovel and his roommate are there, and Manny is there, and he's like, get your shit, let's go. Then he sees that even Rory Scovel has like 1 million headshots.
Yeah.
And he just wants to be part of the gang.
Yeah.
And it's doubly sad because a hitman bursts in and kills both of them and everyone except Manny, which is like really surprising.
Why does he stop?
He runs out of bullets. He clicks the gun. Yeah. He misses Manny completely. It's a little insane, but he misses Manny completely, shoots the rest of them.
Yeah.
And then Manny like begs for his life and he's like, get out of LA. Don't ever
Hell
come back. Yeah. We pick up with a short scene of Sidney Palmer performing where he says, I'm really happy to be performing in this venue and stuff and play something. He plays a plaintive jazz number as we find out Eleanor St. John is dead and Margot Robbie had died of, I presume, a drug overdose.
At 34.
34. Very sad. We skip ahead to 1952 and Diego Calva, Manny is visiting Los Angeles with his new family from Mexico.
Yeah.
And getting back to the kind of like the idea of assimilation in the movie, Manny is constantly rejecting his Mexican heritage.
He keeps saying he's from Spain, Madrid.
Yeah, his family lives in LA and he never visits them.
Oh,
and he at the Randolph Hearst party, he says he's from Spain, and then as he's pushed out of Hollywood, he has to reconnect, and he comes back and he has a Mexican wife and daughter, and then he goes to the movies and watches Singing in the Rain, and we have montage, and that's it. And the montage is fucking cool. I really like the montage.
Yeah.
One thing I love about it. What actually got me about it is like, so there's all these like montage of like 100 years of cinema essentially, which is very interesting. You see a lot of stuff where you're like, I've seen that, like silent cinema, Trip to the Moon, Un Chien Andalou.
Was there like a glimpse of Irma Vep for a second?
Yes,
I think so.
I think
we
which we're watching right now.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is when it turns to color and chemicals. And I was like, I love that.
Yeah.
The idea that it's just like all you're seeing is a chemical process. And all it's back to is like these base tools of creation. But really that's all you're looking at. And like through the history of cinema, not only does it change with the technology and the scientific advancement, but it becomes more artistic. But at the end, you're just like, it's just fucking color. just sound and color.
Yeah.
And I really like that stuff. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. But it's like I see why it's like worth worshipping just sound and just color. Like it's it demands its own standard. Like it you have to be in awe.
The funny kind of like reflexive part of it is like I've just experienced this maximalist film that's all just sound and color too. And like I like that feeling where it's like, because like you see actually there's a glimpse in that montage of the sound and color of the slate for Babylon clacking. You can see Babylon written on the slate. And I was like, it's very like kind of fun film schooly academic in a way, and I like that. I think it's like I just
that is fun.
I
but
think
like
it's fucking cool.
That's fucking dope. Yeah. Hell yeah.
And no other movie really does it like that.
And a totally unique like ending visually. Like I've never seen anything like maybe Maestro did it for 5 seconds, but it's like depicting a time that is very specific to that.
I
Meanwhile,
do love
this like travels through time.
I do love too how like when he's sitting in the theater and he thinks back and you go back to that party. Yeah. And every time I watch this movie, every time I think, I'm just like, I love looping back. I love stories that loop back to the beginning in this interesting way. And I think what this does is like, you could imagine this being a collective fever dream of the people.
Yeah.
But he's still at that party. He's still kind of there.
Of course.
And when he sees the films, he's brought back there to this moment that completely changed the future of him and of the art form. It kind of makes me think, I'm like, if he could go back and do it again, but he can't. And I find that stuff both melancholy, but also refreshing and interesting. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be like bogged down by what the entirety of the movie has to offer, but if you can take away even 50%, like a lot of people did, it's worth the rewatch.
Have I convinced you this movie is good or what?
I feel like I want to give it another watch.
Maybe not today.
Not today is what I'm saying. And also like I would definitely would have like felt different if I had watched it at the cinemas the first time and felt like even more trapped. But I liked it at the episodic nature in which I consumed it.
I think though, like the insanity of it at the theaters is like, at least it's like fun and
the
crazy.
Adrenaline would keep it going.
And I think more so than lots of movies. Like there's some very long movies. We've mentioned one before where it's like it's not paced in a way that keeps you on. You're like keep going. This movie can drag you along, and like even. We've mentioned it a couple times, but the rattlesnake scene is just kind of like right at the edge of you being like, fucking Christ. It brings you back because the next scene after that is kind of like, all right, we're back into it.
Yeah. Powerhouses. Like a who's who of everybody is fucking in this movie.
It's great. I love it. I'm excited for whatever Damien Chazelle is doing next.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn, man.
Babylon 2.
Bring us the 6-hour director's
Babylon
cut,
2,
my guy.
La La Land. Second Man.
No. Says Second Man. Oh, did it win any awards?
Ooh, it was nominated for 3, and they were all technical. One of them was score. Babylon score is pretty fucking good. Because I actually was, excuse me, but I was listening to our Academy Awards show.
Yeah.
And I did mention that Babylon score was really good, and
That's
I think it must have been nominated, from last year. Speaking of that, this is your last show for a couple weeks.
Oh my gosh, you guys are not going to hear from me, but there's tons of far more exciting people.
It's just going to be me and a computer generated voice of myself talking.
Don't you dare.
And the next 3 episodes are going to be about Babylon.
Oh. You and just like Tobey Maguire grinning at you from a corner.
Yeah.
Isn't this guy crazy?
So
he's a star.
Get ready for Babylon 2, 3, and 4
for the next few weeks.
Then when you come back from India, Academy Award time.
Yeah, baby.
That's right.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, Babylon, baby.
Go watch it. If you haven't, give it a goddamn shot. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. You have to see something like this. It's also, too crazy to not watch.
Don't take anyone's word for what this movie is to you.
Yeah, dude.
Just experience it on your own terms.
By virtue of us talking about it on the pod, you guys have to go see it because you know it's good taste.
I think you should.
It's a good quality.
It's something to think about.
Is it a love letter to cinema? or suicide note. It's both.
Oh my God.
Chills. All right, enjoy it.
All right.
I love you guys.
Love you, bye.
Bye.